Hello and welcome. In today's exciting episode, I make a vintage Chanel style jacket from this Butterick pattern with 3/4 sleeves.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
Okay, it is time to make a green tweed jacket. I'm using Butterick 6328. The little blue one in the corner, which is jacket A. It's cropped collarless jacket. And I've already made a mock-up of this. So here are the pieces. So there's the front is just one piece, and the back is one piece cut on the fold. So it's a really big piece. And then, as you can see, there's no lining, so I just made my own. Basically, the front inside of the lining is half silk, half tweed, and then the back is all silk. And here is my mock-up in just a sort of denim weight cotton with flowers printed on it. It was a decorative fabric, but it doesn't have, it's not treated, so it's just printed cotton, but heavier. So here is, and that turned out nice. And I was thinking about lengthening it a little bit, making it a little less cropped, but this piece of tweed, it's only 1 yard and it's only just enough to fit all the pieces. As you can see, I had to use a 3/4 sleeve instead of a full sleeve because that is all I could fit. So I cut out all the pieces, and then I also cut out the structural layer. I'm using netting for my structural layer and actually cut out two because I'm going to do heavy beading over it. So then I pinned together the two structural layers, and once they were together, I put each piece of the tweed over the top, so the outer fabric, and then I pinned them, each piece I pinned together, and once each piece was together, I pinned all of them together in the order that I'm going to sew them in. So the inside front to the front to the side of the back, and then the back all the way round. And I'm just using up some scraps of and then I did the same thing to the sleeves. And I'm just using up some of my scraps of netting, which is why some bits are different colours. So again, then I pinned them together along my sew line, and once everything was together, it's time to get the machine out and machine sew them. So they've been machine sewn. So all the torso, the body of the jacket is one, and the sleeves are each. So we've got 2 whole sleeves. And then you just turn it out carefully and just check that there's no pucks or gathers. If there is, just unpick it and redo it. And once it's fine, then pin together the top front and the top back on each side, machine sew them, and then you've got shoulders. Okay, so now everything is pinned together. I also, at this stage, did the lining, which is basically the same but in silk. And then at the top, there's a yoke of tweed and backing fabric just to make it stronger. Now, the machine needles that you use, this is a summer weight tweed with a cotton base rather than a wool base. So I use the quilting or cotton needle for that. And when you're doing silk, you really, really need to use a microtex needle. It doesn't matter what numbers are at the bottom. It depends on your machine. Some machines like a 70, some like an 80, some like a 90. And so I can't tell you what your machine will prefer because literally every single model of machine likes something different. But I've got a really old one, so mine prefers the sort of medium, the middle one, not too narrow, not too. So anyway, yeah, but if you can't afford to buy lots of different types of needles, then I would recommend just buying the Microtex, doing your silk lining first when the needle is the sharpest, and then doing everything else afterwards. And then once everything is sewn, the next step is to pin back the seam allowance on your outer jacket and your lining. And then you just have lots of hand sewing to do. So as you can see, I have pinned them all, carefully pinned them all, and it is ready to do all the hand sewing, which is going to take me forever. That's the downside of doing your lining and your outer jacket at the same time, because yeah, it's lots of hand sewing, unbroken all at once. So yeah, I am going to go and do that now. Oh my goodness, to say that the hand sewing took an absolute age is an understatement, but they are all hand stitched. So now the next step is to attach the structural layer, so the netting, to the actual tweed. So I just pin where I'm going to sew my lines, and then I hand stitch the two together. And in this case, I used a sort of greenish colour, 2 threads doubled over, so 4 threads. It just means that they're held together securely without sort of any pulls or anything like that. So the next thing, once you've brought your layers together so that they're supporting each other, is to hem at the cuffs and the torso of the jacket, the body of the jacket. So I pin them all up, then I hand stitch them. And then once that's done, the next step is to attach the sleeves. So I set the sleeves by pinning them into place. You pin the top middle, then you do the bottom half, and then you fill in the other bits, and then you machine sew them, and then you turn it out and check it, then you machine sew it again to reinforce, then you trim down the bottom third just so that it doesn't graze hurt under your arm when you're wearing it, and then you pin all the seam and you clip the curves, then you pin all the seam allowance into the sleeve. As you can see, I'm wiggling my fingers, and then you hand stitch it in. I hand stitch it once from the outside, then I turn it in and I hand stitch it again from the inside. It just means that you're never going to have any problems with your sleeves for decades. And then the next step is to attach the lining. So you sew the lining to the outer jacket, then you turn it out and check it, then you turn it inside out again, and you do the neckline. And once you've machine sewn that, you check it, then you machine sew it again, clip the curve, turn it out, and then now the next step is to hand stitch along the up to the top, around the neckline, and then down the front again. And that took forever. And once you've done that, the next step is to turn up the silk and hand stitch that down, and then put a weight at the chain at the bottom. I'm going to bead mine, so I'm going to leave the lining open so that I can get inside and do all the beading. But there you go. That is the final jacket for now. I think I'm going to do dark blue beads on this, but I'm not sure. I think green would also look really pretty. But there's quite a bit of yellow in the tweed as well. So I don't know, it's such a lovely rich coloured tweed. I think I'll leave it hanging on the rack for a bit, but yeah, probably dark blue beads. Anyway, this is what it looks like from the side. It is a very vintage silhouette, and here it is from the back. I do miss the princess seams, the McCall's pattern that I usually use to do the vintage tweed, vintage Chanel style jacket does look a little different than this, but I think I like it. This is the first time I've done this in tweed, and yeah, I think I like it. I mean, I do like it, but it's just so simple, and yeah, I sort of have to put the weight of the beads on it before I can finally decide whether I really like it or not. So yeah, but I think I do. It's definitely a vintage Chanel look silhouette. It's very boxy, and here's this orange and multicolored sort of tweed is the McCall's one, and here is the one that I've just finished, the Butterick. So I think the McCall's one, you can sort of see that it goes in at the natural waist, so just at the high waist, whereas this green one that I've just done is very boxy, so it's true, 1960s look, vintage Chanel, whereas this front one is stylized more towards the end of the Karl Lagerfeld era, when he was doing vintage, if you get what I mean. So it's more of a retro vintage than original vintage. This is more of the original, but I think I don't know, I think because I have such a large collection, I can afford to have several different types of jackets. So in that respect, I do like it, but it's just, I don't know, I guess I'm just not used to seeing a one-piece front and a one-piece back. What I do really like about this Butterick pattern is that it does take a lot less time because, I mean, when you hand stitch down the seam allowance, that does take up time. And with this jacket here, the Butterick one, you've got a one-piece sleeve, you've got a one-piece front and a one-piece back, as opposed to the Vogue 7975 or that other McCall's one that I use. Though both of those ones, they have two-piece fronts, three-piece backs, and two-piece sleeves. So there's almost twice as many seams that you have to hand stitch down. And yeah, so I mean, all that does add up all the time. You still have to hand stitch the structural layer to the tweed just as much, but yeah, there's less seams. So just because there's less seams, there is less hand sewing. So it did take less time than the other patterns that I've been using. So that is good. But I mean, if you want a jacket to keep it for decades, then a couple more hours either way shouldn't really be your reason for choosing a pattern well, not in my book anyway. I think I like both of them. Yeah, I do. And as you can tell from the lights, it's quite late. So I am going to quickly edit all this and get this video out. But yeah, I do recommend this pattern. It is much easier and less labor intensive than some of the other Chanel style jacket patterns commercially available. So yeah, I think I do recommend this one, and I look forward to beading it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've been inspired to make a Chanel style jacket of your very own. I think the next time I use this pattern, I'll make sure I've got a larger piece of tweed so I can do the full length sleeves. I do think the 3/4 sleeves look particularly vintage, so it does suit this style well, but I personally prefer a long sleeve. But it is nice to have a range of different jackets, different choices. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I hope you've been inspired to go ahead and make your own Chanel style, well, vintage Chanel style jacket.